Have a seat on your porcelain throne. It's time to talk some shit on the Powell movement.
Welcome to the Powell movement. I'm your host, Mike Powell, and if you've been listening for the past few weeks, you know that my wife, Ange, is sick again. We were blindsided from an appointment for routine blood work that turned into a scan, that turned into a PET scan, which turned into a diagnosis of stage 4 cancer, which turned into a major surgery. Ange is a day out of surgery as I record this. They had to remove a bunch of stuff, and the bad news that I know of right now is that they couldn't get to everything. So now she's in excruciating pain as she heals, and we figure out the next steps in treating the cancer that is left. This is really all I care to share this week, as all the other information that the doctors are giving us is all speculative. And that's the last thing you guys need to hear is speculation. So I'll share what I'm comfortable with, and that's the facts and my feelings. And the feelings part of this is the hardest part. First and foremost, it is so difficult to watch the loved one in pain. So I have that going on, and while that's brutal, really, the pain is temporary. But the fear of death is real, and it's so hard to put into words without crying. For me, it's like when I'm not upset, I feel numb. I'm like a deer in the headlights half the time. But then I have to try to be as supportive and empathetic as possible when I'm around Ange, and then I have to keep things normal and upbeat with Keaton, all while letting him know that things aren't normal. It's a weird existence right now. It's like I have 3 different personalities that I have to be depending on my situation. And then you add on everything that needs to happen in life, and well, life and emotions get really complicated. And then on top of that, I need to make a little time for me each day to keep my sanity. So I ride the bike and I walk the dog, and really, I just can't believe life is here at this situation again. It's not fair. And that's just me. I can't imagine what goes through Ange's mind every day. I know she shares a lot with me, but I also know that she keeps some stuff to herself. And I feel so bad for her because this is all so scary. But scared or not, my job is to make podcasts. And what I needed this week was a podcast with someone who's been through all kinds of shit, but also someone I consider a brother. So I could use the podcast as a little bit of a therapy session where I'd ask my guests about some of the things that my family's experiencing, and he can relate them to his life's work. Because Roy Tuscany is a great human being who turned the worst day of his life into his life's work as the founder of the Fives Foundation. Roy makes more of a difference in more lives than anyone I know. And this week, we don't talk about Roy's story. We talk about the lives he's impacted and so much more. When we scheduled this podcast, I had no clue that my life would be put in a blender again. But everything happens for a reason. Actually, I'm not so sure I believe in that anymore. But it's cool that the timing worked out to where Roy is my guest this week, because I really do love that guy. Before we get into the podcast, I want to thank all of you for all the nice messages and notes. It's overwhelming in a good way, so thank you for your kind words. Thank you for listening each week. And now, it's more important than ever that you support my sponsors because they have stood by me through a lot of shit and they continue to do so, and I can't tell you how much easier that makes my life. So please support Outdoor Research, Stanley, Rollerblade, Best Day Brewing, Elon Skis, and Peter Glenn Ski and Sports. Now, it's time to talk to my guest, Roy Tuscany. Roy, you are the founder of the Fives Foundation, and that is a cool title that I'm sure you're beyond proud to have today, and it's created so many opportunities for you and your family. And this may sound like a really stupid question, but do you ever wish that none of this shit ever happened to you? You never had your injury?
You know, I wish that this injury didn't have to happen to anyone, but I think it had to happen to someone that could take the opportunity of this very negative, very earth-shattering, life-changing, it's called a life-changing injury for a reason, and take it and spin it in a way to try to help others that would fall into the same shoes that I did. So I think, like, do I wish it upon anyone else? No. Do I wish it upon myself? No. But if it was going to happen to someone, give it to someone that literally has been working on trying to solve how to move forward from a life-changing injury since the day it's happened to him and share it with others.
But if you think about life honestly, where do you think you would be if you hadn't overshot that jump by 50 feet or whatever you overshot it by?
You know, I guess like that's a really good question because like I have a college degree from the University of Vermont, mechanical engineering, mathematics. I was a really talented skier. I had a great job going there. I was building houses on the side. I think like truthfully, if this injury didn't happen, like probably would be building houses, skiing every day and being a ski instructor. I mean, I think I'd be living a life of fulfillment of a smaller capacity, but nothing to say that's not living a life of fulfillment by doing that. It's just, I don't think I would be serving as many people as I am now.
Yeah, and I mean, if you think about all the people that you serve, I mean, you're one of the lucky ones. You're disabled, but you're able to walk, you're able to ski, you're able to do so many different things. But I've seen you after a day of walking a trade show, and can you describe the pain that you experience on a daily basis that no one will ever really think about?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good thing to look at, Mike. Like, you and I have walked a lot of trade shows together, and I think, like, I always try to grind through it. I always try to grit through it. You know, luckily, I usually will travel with a cane or whatever to help aid for it. But, like, at the end of the day, the amount of pain, and it's really built in this kind of like heavy fluid that gets like built up in the lower back area, my hips, and then also in my ankles. And I think, like, from a pain perspective, like, when I can feel something, because I've lost the majority of sensation from, hips down to my feet, it varies to the point where I have little to no sensation in my feet. And after a day of trade show, like you mentioned, or after a day of skiing or mountain biking, whatever it may be, the amount of fluid that is in those areas and the amount of pain that I can feel, pain in me on that level is like a 4 to 6. But think about it, if I'm feeling 4 to 6 and typically I feel nothing. So if
Right.
I feel it at a level of 4 to 6, I imagine that pain is probably for a typical person, pushing 10 or that unhappy, like really angry red face.
Well, that's scary. And then I would think that some people just look at you like you're not handicapped because at first glance, you don't look that way. And when you get out of your monster truck that's parked in a handicapped spot and you walk out, do people ever say anything to you? Do people ever look at you and be like, hey, man, why are you parking there?
Yeah, I definitely get a lot of looks. And, I've kind of always like compared my injury now, nearly 17 years plus of this injury. And each year, like, has some gotten better and some gotten worse. But, one of the questions I always get, like, is it going to get better? Well, probably not. It's 17 years and I'm still kind of where I've been. And I've always kind of compared it to purgatory. And I think that's also kind of like the idea of like when I park in these spots and like, individuals see me get out, it's that same idea of like purgatory. Am I in hell or if I am in air, if I am in heaven? Or if I am supposed to be parking here or if I am, should I be not? And I think like it's this really weird place for me. And I think that gives me this kind of weird perspective too. It's like I see how individuals react when they see my disability. And I also see how individuals react when they see me without my disability. And I really think that's something that I might have a little bit of a keen eye to why I can serve this community really well through the work of High Fives.
And then on the flip side of that whole parking spot scenario, have you ever lost your mind on an able-bodied asshole who parks in a handicapped spot?
I've definitely never lost my mind, but I definitely like to play like maybe if I have a business card, leave it underneath their windshield wiper with like, hey, a donation will help your move today. I haven't done anything as good as the Nelk boys did with the guys who moved the handicap spot in front of the guys and then pretended to be in chairs and pretended to be a motorcycle gang. I don't know if you saw that video that went around social media, but I definitely would rather be creative than be an asshole.
And what's the most inconsiderate situation or scenario that you've seen an able-bodied person do or say to someone with a disability? Have you seen just fucked up shit? Because I'm sure you mentally note it all.
I mean, I've definitely seen a lot. And I think, like, obviously, my wife, who's been on your podcast, Elena Nichols, Elena is in a chair. And definitely, we encounter stuff on a regular basis, and she encounters stuff on a way more regular basis than we do. But one of the ones that I remember most recently was I went for a mountain bike ride and I use an e-bike. The reason I use an e-bike is because I don't have the power in my legs to be able to propel a mountain bike up a mountain. So I've gotten really into mountain biking over the years as the e-bike has developed. And from that, I've gotten to really get to go explore and almost get to hike again because I don't have the ability to really propel myself up trails. So super confident on my mountain bike, getting super excited. And I go out and I'm on this trailhead and these two firemen pop out and they look at me and they start laughing. And I literally kind of look at it and I'm like, oh, like, don't think of it as much. And then this one guy goes, isn't that cute? You're all smiling. You don't even have to try as you go by us. Maybe you should try real mountain biking. And I was like, oh, all right. And I got off my bike And I definitely probably like I mean, Mike, I definitely have a limp. I
Yeah.
definitely am not like the best walker, but I definitely probably overemphasized my limp this day as I walked up to them. And I said, "Hey man, I'm so sorry. I forgot I was partially paralyzed until you brought this up. And I use this bike so I can get out and mountain bike just like you guys. And I'm so sorry I offended you." I take off thinking like nothing of it. I'm riding with one of my coworkers, Sano, who's just like, the kid's got some wit that's just beyond wit. And we get up to the top of the trail, probably like 2 miles after this altercation with these two guys. And he's laughing pretty heavily as he gets up to me. And I'm like, "What's up, dude?" And he's like, "Dude, you'll never believe it." And I was like, he's like, "I'll tell you the first version first." So the real version is he comes up to the top of the trail where he's laughing his heads off. I'm like, "What's up, dude? Why are you laughing so much?" He's like, "Dude, it's true." And I'm like, "What's true?" He goes, "Firemen really do drive around in vans." And I'm like, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Well, I heard what those guys said to you, and I just saw them in a van, and so I asked them if it's true that firemen." And I guess they said yes, but I took off so fast I didn't really get an answer out of them. And so that is the type of humor that, like kind of if someone parks in a spot or not and stuff like that. And so the clean version, Sano gets up to the top of the trail, we're laughing, and he definitely said something to the firemen to get them to think about that their job is to serve people not only in fires, but, across all barriers, and maybe to think and act with kindness before they judge someone on an e-bike, because you really don't know what people are going through. And like, I think that's really a good lesson for all. It's like when you see something that might look out of place or, and not the right realm or whatever, is like act out of curiosity and not out of accusation. And I think you'll get this like amazing response. Or if you're witty like my buddy Sano, you'll get a really fiery response back to you as well if you accuse.
Yeah, you should never assume what somebody's story is, and your story is one that we've talked about before. In fact, everyone should hear it. We recorded episode 49 6 years ago, and since then, you've recorded 17 other podcasts. How many times a month do you tell that story, and do you ever feel like a broken record telling your birth story almost?
It's definitely the second coming of Roy Tuscany, and I think the number of 17 is like 17 major ones. I've definitely done a lot. And sometimes I feel like I have two a week, almost feeling like I'm hosting my own. But it's really something that I'm trying to stray away from now. I think the story's been told. It's really easy to find it, as you mentioned. And, I've done some really great podcasts on some really incredible platforms and gotten to tell that story. But like, obviously the story is the catalyst to like why we're still talking to us today. And, also I want to make sure guests realize that I'm also the only other host ever to host the Powell movement, as I've gotten the honor to do the Mike Powell interview twice now on this incredible platform too.
You are the only person I would trust with that. And yes, you are the only other host of the Powell movement. And I will say that in this version of the Powell movement, the goal is not to talk about all the things that you've touched on when you're telling your story. And while I find that really interesting, what I find more interesting is that you meet so many people on the worst day of their entire life, or a couple days after the worst day of their entire life. And I'm sure you've learned the ways to deal with walking in that room and seeing those people and talking to them. Can you describe how hard that is to do for like the first dozen times when you walk in the room and you meet somebody eye to eye on the worst day of their lives?
Well, first off, it's not so much them if they have other people around them. But when you see an individual completely by themselves, that's a completely different story. And that's only been a small amount. Majority of these times, these life-changing injuries, they create ripples as if you're throwing a rock in a pond and the ripples create out. People come and they want to support. And, the initial is really not that hard, because at the start of these, that individual is being cared for in a way that I imagine we all want to be cared for, 24/7 care. And obviously, yeah, they're going through something, but at the same time, everything is being handled for them at the top level of care if they're in a good hospital. The ones that are really seeing the effects are those initial ripples in that rock that's thrown in the pond. And those are the people that you actually have to have the reality talk with. And a lot of times doctors will say things that to an open-minded individual, they sound good, especially in the spinal cord world. And for some reason, whoever decided to create this kind of like numbering system for spinal cord decided to make it so that everything we're taught in life is backwards. So we're taught in life, you want to get an A, right? Well, in the spinal cord world, you actually don't want to get an A. It's called an Asia score, and it's scored A to D. And if you scored A, that means you have zero function, zero sensation, zero motor skills. And if you get a D, that means that your body, yes, it's in shock, but the Asia score is showing that you're going to have full motor skills, full system, full everything back. So again, like you get this initial idea from the doctor, oh, hey, we gave you an Asia score of an A. They don't really tell you what that means, but in your mind, you're like, oh, I got an A. This is awesome. I'm scoring. I'm winning. And then the next thing they might tell you is like, hey, we looked at your spinal cord injury and, you have a complete injury. Oh my God, that's so great. It's still complete. It's still intact. No, sorry. The word complete means that your cord's been severed and that there is no connection now between your brain and your extremities because the connection has been completely lost. But again, the doctor tells you this and you're like, oh my God, this is awesome. I've got an A, it's complete. And these things that we've been taught are the complete opposite. And so a lot of times the hardest things that end up on my shoulders is explaining this information back to people because it's usually not explained. And when it's not explained, the brain, we think about it, hey, he got an A and he's told he's complete. Oh, awesome. Or she, he or she. And it's like, okay, like A and complete. And then you come in and you're like, oh my God, I'm really sorry. But this is what that means. And in those moments, that's when this reality sinks in exactly at that point because you're actually explaining what this medical information means. And I think those are those moments where the first couple times it's like, how do you say this? How do you explain this? How do you crush the dreams that this individual who they've thought from what our brain thinks is a good score is really an absolute negative one.
So when you crush those dreams, unfortunately, by just providing definitions to their medical diagnosis, when you leave there, I mean, what are the emotions like? Are you just totally drained when you leave a room like that? When you kind of see that you're sucking the life out of somebody by telling them what their future is going to look like a little bit?
I don't know so much that it's like sucking the life out of them. I think like it's that reality that sets in. And I think like a lot of times, like people don't understand this, and it might get something you and I can relate to. Like, you and I have a really amazing ability to MC and auctioneer events together. We've hosted many. And yeah, from a naked eye, it's like, oh, these guys are just talking on the mic. But from like the back end view of this, like the research you and I do, the years of us doing it, the way we play off each other, the chemistry, the energy, the volume, all those things. Yeah, it might be an hour's worth of work for the two of us, but the lead up and the decompression from it is really a lot of work. And so it's like we are a high commodity from that. And I don't think people realize just from that point of view how much energy that takes. Now think about that same idea having to go in, really deliver something that, there's been medical professionals who are kind of skirting around it. Not saying that's what they're doing, but they're not really giving the full information or providing the empathetic approach to what's happening in this individual's life. And all of a sudden you have to do that, and you have to do it in a way that gives them a positive outlook, that tells them like, dude, no matter what, high fives, myself, like, we'll be here for you. And there's going to be a community that's here for you. And when you can try to relay that in a way that leaves hope and you deal hope, it's an amazing thing to be able to do. But what it also does is it takes so much of a part of you to stay at this super high level, because you have to keep your energy up. You have to keep their energy up. And you have to kind of keep the energy of everybody else that they're going to talk to in the next couple of days up, because you're delivering hope. And I'll tell you what, like, hope is a drug that is bigger, larger than any drug than anybody's ever experienced. And when you give and you provide it, it's really at a scale that I think no one really understands when it's coming from interiorly you and sharing it with others.
It's time for my first sponsor break, and Seattle's own Outdoor Research has been supporting this podcast for almost 5 seasons. But you know what? I've been wearing their gear long before they bought ads, because they make hands down the warmest and most waterproof gear I've ever purchased. And you know what? There's something to be said for going out into the elements knowing that you're going to be drier and warmer than everyone else because you're rocking gear made with the best materials that were tested in the brutal elements of the Pacific Northwest. I mean, for decades, OR has been the one-stop shop for mountaineers climbing 7,000-meter peaks, because those life or death situations should always be outfitted with the best gear. but that's only a small part of what they do. Over the past few seasons, OR designers have been working with OR ambassadors like backcountry skier Mark Abma, US Free Ski team members Troy Podmilsack and Zoe Aiken, and snowboarder Neil Provo to create new baggier fits and styles that turn heads and have people saying, "Whoa, is that an outdoor research jacket?" This season, I'll be rocking the freeride fit of the Snow Crew and Norak. And on the colder days, you'll find me in the lightly insulated Tungsten 2. I'm dialed in for this season with outerwear, and now it's your turn. To find the best for you, head on over to outdoorresearch.com and see the new website with all the new products on it. Next up, it's Peter Glenn Ski and Sports. And while we're at the end of summer, it's still really hot. And that means it's time to get in the water. And Peter Glenn is the one-stop shop for all of your needs. Think wakeboard, water ski, kneeboard, tubes, swimwear. They have everything to make your summer more fun and functional. And they're a Rollerblade brand dealer, so you can take care of your inline needs as well. Peter Glenn has all the brands, all the products, a knowledgeable staff to help you, and a best-in-class website if you can't make it to their stores. But that's not all. They also have a low price guarantee, free shipping on orders of $50 or more, and a hassle-free return policy, which is very important. Peter Glenn isn't one of those big guys trying to take over an industry. They're the mom and pop shop that you've trusted for almost 70 years. If you like this podcast and want it to keep going, please buy from Peter Glenn Ski and Sports. To find out more, head on over to peterglenn.com. My final sponsor this round is Stanley, the iconic Northwest brand that invented the category of keeping things hot and cold over 100 years ago. You remember Stanley from your grandfather's green thermos that kept his coffee hot forever when he took you out on adventures. Well, Stanley still makes that bottle and so much more. Think tumblers, water bottles, barware, camping utensils, coolers, vacuum bottles. There really is something for everyone over at Stanley, and you aren't going to find them overpriced like a lot of copycat designer brands that have popped up recently. Stanley is the originator, and they pride themselves on providing you with the best products at the best value. And that value gets even better when you shop with my discount code. When you head on over to stanley1913.com, go shopping. When you check out, enter the code winteriscoming, that's all one word, all lowercase, and you're going to get 30% off your entire order. Those are my sponsors. Now let's jump back into the podcast. You're an expert on this. I mean, you've done this hundreds of times, seeing people after an injury and providing that hope. And when you walk into that room, I mean, first, is everyone psyched to see you? Do they look at you as that beacon of hope, like this guy did what I did and he's walking in here and maybe I'll be able to walk in here one day?
You know, one guy has said it best, and I don't know if every experience is like this, but a close friend of ours, Eric Zerenner, had a spinal cord injury, and he labeled it as, "I'm a real-life Santa Claus when you see Roy come into your room." And I think that's like, take it or leave it. And I do believe that there's been moments, especially for someone like Eric, who's had this recovery and this comeback that no one could ever expect, and has done it in a way and continues to live his life to almost a level above, but now has an extra side to him that has so much giving and caring and wanting to share with others. Not every single story is like Eric's. Eric got hurt in a ski accident, had a small prognosis for a full recovery, and has had a 110% recovery. And was I a part of it? Yeah. Was I the one who dealt him hope? Maybe, but he put in the hard work. And he also had the opportunity because he had a really good Asia score and his spinal cord was still intact. There's other people that I walk into the room and I imagine, at first, maybe they have this idea of high hope for me coming in, or maybe some people, a lot of times have no desire because they don't want to ever face the idea of what's happened to them. And I think one of the hardest things that people don't realize is that you cannot move forward until you stop trying to press rewind. That is something that I hope not only can I help people understand on top of providing hope, but I think it took me a long time to stop the fucking idea of trying to rewind my injury. It is impossible. And I think it's not only just for me, I think it's for anything that's life changing, addiction, terrible medical diagnosis, whatever it is. If you are focused on, well, what if we would have done this? Or what if we could go do this? You can't. So if you want to stay in that space of trying to hit this rewind button that's not operating, nothing's going to move forward. And that's something that I really try to bring to folks. And I think is something that, has taken me to a place that gets me to not try to stay stuck, but moving forward from, not just life changing injuries, but other crap that happens on the day to day thing of this game called life.
Yeah, I mean, I would think that everyone reacts to this thing differently. Like, some people are going to be angry, saying, why me? Some people think it's not fair. There's a mix of all that. But eventually, you have to accept your new reality. And when you think about it, how long did it take you to accept that new reality where you were able to just not rewind and go forward? Does that take months?
It really took more than months. I mean, I think at first it was a bit of shock and a bit of, yeah, I'm okay. And then over time, like, you really start to see how things are changing in your life. Like, the first real, like, mental mess up for an individual is that time when you leave the hospital system. In the hospital system, everybody's the same around you. Everybody's battling to recover. And you all have that common unity there, along with the staff there that's helping you and others get through that phase of your life. You get outside of the walls of the hospital, and like all of a sudden, people are looking at you because all of a sudden you're not like everybody else around you. And how do you deal with that? How do you move forward from it? I think that's one thing that's a really hard kind of place for folks. And then, like, depending on how much planning you've done to the quality of life, so many folks are like, oh, I don't mind bumping up and down these stairs every day to go to my bedroom. Really try it 3 weeks in a row, and you're gonna be like, this is the worst thing in my life. So depending on like how quality of life is outside of the hospital when you move back in, like, that's another big mental block, another big mental breakdown. But I think, like, for me, I ended up going to this program called Landmark, which really helped me understand that, like, by the end of the thing, what Landmark is trying to teach you is the idea that, like, I don't know, like, one of the things, like, what is the sound of a single hand clap? I'm asking you, Mike. What is the sound of a single hand clap?
I'm doing it. I mean, it sounds like I'm jerking off.
I mean, it's just the sound of a single hand clap. That's all it is. And it's the simplicity of that idea that don't overthink things. And like, there's nothing you can do with the past. And so, like, yeah, the past shapes us into who we are. But if, like, we continually try to allow the past to dictate our future, we're going to be operating from an anxious space. We're going to be operating out of fear. And so, like, this program, Landmark, really got me to understand that by the time I got to where I was at the time of this program, like, that's where I really felt like my healing started. And that was, I think, like 8 years post injury. And now I'm close to 17 years. So, like, I feel like the best years for me have been like the last 9 to 10 years. And it took like 7 to 8 years and some real realization. And I'm still healing. Like, God, it's not easy not being able to do a lot of the stuff. Men's slow pitch softball. Like, if I could do anything, I'd probably want to play men's slow pitch softball. But it's hard. But at the same time, when you stop trying to hit this imaginary rewind button, you finally can move forward. And I think that was the realization for me. I tell people all the time, like, healing is not going to happen in 1 week or in 1 month or in 1 year. It's going to be a time. And life changing injuries doesn't mean that life changing injuries are solved in 1 year. It's going to take a period of time.
Man, I'm sitting here with my jaw dropped thinking that it took you 7, 8 years to really accept it, although you did move forward with your life and creating the foundation and everything, but still, being able to accept your reality took a lot longer than I thought. And then there's another side of things that I'm kind of dealing with it right now. You know, with Ange having cancer, it's really let me know who my and our real friends are. And with all life-altering things, I know it can be uncomfortable and not everyone needs to reach out because it's like a weird thing. But it's been wild to me to see people who I thought were close friends not reach out on both times of this cancer. And do you find that with these type of injuries too? Like, some people that you thought really cared for you were so freaked out that they couldn't visit you and couldn't talk to you and you really saw their true colors?
I think, like, with disability, and I think with cancer too, let's think about it, okay? If you listed out like a list of fears to everybody, my fears pre injury are like snakes, really dark places, and failure financially. Now post this, like, there's a lot of other things that now are on a list of what, are really scary things. And I guarantee if you gave people a list of 10 things, and in that list of 10 things were snakes and spiders, but a couple of the other things in there is like cancer, debilitating injury. I guarantee a lot of people would circle those as their biggest fears. And the reason I think in these moments where I don't think it's true colors, I think it's the insecurities and fears of others, of the fact that those are their deepest fears that they have for themselves. And they're seeing it happen to someone. They don't know how to act. They don't know how to behave. They don't know how to support. And a lot of times in these moments, I think like so many people want to always try to compare their story. Oh my God, my second aunt had this. And through their experience, I know what it was like. No, you don't.
Yeah.
Same thing with a life-changing injury. Oh my God, like in high school, I broke both my ankles and I was in a wheelchair for 3 weeks. Really sorry. But like that is not the point of talking to someone in this space. The point is to try to say like, I see you. And I want to try to understand what you're going through. I'm here to listen. I'm here to hear your side of the story. And I think so many people, instead of doing that, say, I'm afraid of what's going on with you. And the only way that I've been taught in my life to deal with fear is to ignore. And a lot of times, two things happen. One, like you said, like true colors do show. And some people are just assholes. Like we can just be honest. Like some people are just assholes. And I saw that through my sobriety, like all my buddies who I used to drink with all the time. The second I stopped drinking and stopped buying them drinks, so did the calls and the text messages. Like
Yep.
the true colors showed there. But in these moments, what I think happens is, like I said, if you put a list of 10 things that people could circle their 5 biggest fears, cancer, debilitating, are probably on that list that people would circle. And the majority of the way that we've been taught as individuals to deal with things is to ignore. And the one thing that I always try to express to people is like, yeah, like the initial kind of like alert first 72 hours is super important. It's overwhelming. There's gratitude. If there's a way to raise money, that's really when a majority of it can happen. But I think like the most impactful ones are the people who take the time to make themselves a note that say like, I'm going to send them a note in 6 months and check in. I do that a lot with folks that have passed away. It's like, I usually won't do anything in the grieving. And, where we live and call home in Lake Tahoe, we went through a period of so many influential people dying that if we would have grieved in that way of every single person dying and every single one affecting, like we wouldn't even have a community here. It was too devastating. For me, and during that period, it was like, let's not just check in the first 3 days, but like, let's check in 6 months, 3 years. Like, let's remember who those people are and see how they do over time. That's the one thing that I think so many people want to do. They want to instantly act. They want to instantly be a part of it. They want to instantly take this responsibility in the recovery or the care. And it's really like, hey, like, how can you be that true long-standing friend? How can you check in when no one else has checked in? And I think that's the idea of like being able to conquer our own fears through, like what Ange is going through or what I've gone through is like, instead of being afraid of it, instead of not talking to that person that, in a wheelchair, instead of just being like, hey, how'd you end up in a wheelchair? It's like, hey, like, how you doing today? And maybe getting to know them a bit. I think that's like a really good place to think of like how to address these things that we're all afraid of and not ignore it and bring some attention to them.
And I think another fear that everyone has to experience when they're going through a life-changing injury is the cost of it all. And I talk about money a lot. And if you're to think about the average cost of everything from the helicopter ride to the hospital, to the surgery, to the hospital stay, to the rehab, and that's only part of it. I'm just putting part of this together. What do you think the per person medical cost for a high five athlete to get out of the hospital is? I mean, I know it's a ballpark because everybody's a little bit different, but someone who's going to be in there for 3 or 4 weeks and have a bunch of surgeries, are they looking at $1 million worth of hospital bills by the time they get out?
They say the average cost for an individual with a spinal cord injury in the first year is north of $1.3 million.
Holy shit.
And I think that number is just from a medical computation side of things. Let's also think like, all right, were you living in a house that's single story with no hard access points? Probably not. Were you driving a vehicle that's easy to modify that also allows you to now bring your adaptive equipment with you? Maybe. Maybe not. There's so many different factors that I think aren't even computed in that number because of the fact that it's really hard to trace once you really look at all the adaptations and needs that are put forth. And then the things that aren't even there is the fact that, the United States government doesn't see catheters as a necessity for individuals with spinal cord injuries because of the fact that when you have certain spinal cord injuries at certain levels, you lose the ability to go to the bathroom on your own. And so there are methods that give you the opportunity. But unfortunately, unless you're really good with insurance, like my buddy Yasmin Bamber and his company UMed are, you're going to have a hard time doing what some reason is not seen as a necessity. And so there's all these incredible, things that aren't even computed in that 1.3. So, I mean, what is the number? I think it's like almost on a tilted like number 8, which is getting close to infinity.
Well, if you think about it, I mean, of that 1.3 that we're just talking about hospital and medical stuff, how much do you think insurance is going to cover out of all that? I mean, are people still liable for 300 grand after their insurance has paid $1 million?
I think it really comes down to how lucky you are to have insurance, how lucky you are to have accidental insurance. One of the things that, like, I know it sounds crazy to like everyone out there, but 2 things that I was super lucky to have, and one thing I wish I had and know about now. And, yeah, it's a little bit of money, but in the long term, it's like, how do you not do it? My mom made a deal with me. My mom said I had to get my own health insurance because I had graduated college and I no longer was allowed to be on their health insurance plan. And if I did that, I didn't have to get a real job. And so for me, that was like such a bargain. So I got my own health insurance and I was a ski instructor for a really great academy, coaching incredible kids in free ride, slopestyle, and big air. And from that, luckily I had insurance the day I got hurt. And somehow I picked a really good plan that had a really great deductible and a really high overall medical plan buyout on the thing. And so I got lucky. So 1, ask your mom, what's the best insurance? That's 1. And then 2, it's like $20 a month. It's nothing for these long-term disability plans. And if you're going to live a lifestyle that's of, high intensity, have a little bit of adrenaline, looking at gravity to be the propellant of how you travel down the mountain in the winter or the summer, like, just go and get a long-term disability plan. If you unfortunately have something that happens to me, you'll be paid for the rest of your life. And not to like push that on people, but like, if you're going to do these things, at least have the responsibility, the accountability to, take care of yourself and not put the burden on others. I think that's something my mom taught me from that was like, if I was going to live this life, like, yeah, like it was at that time too, it's wild. My health insurance was like $119 a month. Like try to find a plan that's $119 a month now. Thank you very much, USA. But that's what saved me. And like, yeah, did I have 119 extra bucks a month or more then? No, but am I medically bankrupt now? I'm not. And so it's like the decisions that you make, like you've got to make the decision sometimes to stop thinking individually and think about the burden of that your consequences might have in others. So like go get a health insurance plan and like pay the $20, go to like Aflac. I don't even know the companies that really do it, but we have a great plan here through our provider, long-term disability plans. If you're going to do wild things, most of the people who listen to this program are doing wild things or at least follow people that do wild things. Go do that. You're protecting yourself and the ones around you and your future.
But I will say that most people in these mountain towns, when they're 18 to 22, they're not really the most responsible people in the world. And I'll speak for people like myself and maybe you when we were younger, although you were pretty responsible there because of your mom. But when I think about it, before I had a wife and a kid, I would think if I were going to become paralyzed, especially if I couldn't use my arms, I would have said, and this would have been a stupid thing for me to say, but I would have said I would rather not live. And do a lot of people have that mindset when something like this happens? And do you have to talk them off a ledge?
I haven't had that conversation. Whew. Did you know the buyer at evo.com?
Yeah.
Do you know that story?
Yeah.
Holy fuck. That one.
I mean, he had that choice. In real time, he had the choice of like, hey, I'm going to live without the use of anything but my voice and my brain, or I can be dead in 8 hours. And I think he chose the latter. He was able to talk to a lot of his friends. I mean, I knew him, but I didn't know him very well. But he was able to talk to people and plan like the bike ride he wanted to do and everything because he made that choice, which is just so heavy to me. But where were you going with him?
That I've never had the alternate happen until then. And I ended up not talking to him, but the individuals that reached out to me that knew of him were like the power hitters in the snow sports industries. the guys that reached out to me to try to talk him to the opposite side were like, if you look at who's been influential in skis and snowboards in the last 20 years, like 5 of them reached out to me, all personal friends of him, being like, hey, what's the advice here? And I mean, you can't ever change it, but I've always said to people, like, life will never be the same, but it can be awesome. And I think it's really up to that person. But you have to redefine how you see awesome. And will you ever do those things again? Not likely. But can we find a way for you to still experience life in a way that gives you that same joy? I bet we can. And we've been able to do that for a lot of people. And we've been able to create moments for an individual that had a level even higher injury from that individual. And that guy was the first guy ever to ski the X Games halfpipe. He's the first guy ever to go heli skiing in the Chugach mountain range with Points North Heli. And so, yeah, did things look different? They do. And does it take a little bit of extra hands and a little bit of extra kindness? It does. But I'll tell you what, the folks that decide to live with a life-changing injury, and there's no difference in the mindset of those that do or that don't, but those that do and those that can find this idea of post-traumatic growth after a life-changing injury, they do things that redefine how people see as inspiration. And it's why folks, when they say, oh, you're so inspiring, when they do things from get out of their car to the grocery store, you're like, are you fucking kidding me? I went 78 miles in a sit ski and won a gold medal. Or I was the first person ever to do a double backflip. Or I was the first individual with no use of their arms to go heli skiing in the Chugach. It's like, you want to call that inspiring? That's inspiring. And I think it's like those that choose to break through these barriers are the ones that really define what inspiration is.
It's time for my second sponsor break, and I'm going to start things off with Elan Skis. I started telling you about Elan building a cult following in the States about 3 years ago. And if you're like me and heading to the mountain on a weekly basis, I know you've been seeing more Elans by the day. Why? Because they'll make you a better skier. The product that Elan puts into the market is second to none. I mean, Elan's a company that also makes luxury yachts, so you know they're not going to cut corners on materials or production. They're built in Elan's proprietary factory, one of the most sustainable in the world, and the difference in quality is noticeable. Walk up to any ski wall and compare the craftsmanship of an Elan ski to the rest, and there's a difference that you will see and feel. But when you get them on the snow, that's where Elan really shines. From my ripstick models to my new favorite twin tip, the Playmaker, Elan keeps making better and more fun skis every year. If you want to have more fun on the mountain next year, head on over to elanskis.com and find the pair that's best for you. My next sponsor is Rollerblade, the brand that invented inline skates. Rollerblade has been keeping skiers in shape since 1980. If you've listened to this podcast and my interviews with US ski teamers, all of them use Rollerblade branded skates to get where they are today. It's the only all-season sport that mimics the motion of skiing and utilizes the same muscle groups. So really, it's a no-brainer that if you want to get better on your skis, in the park or at speed or anywhere really, inline skating is going to make you better. Remember, running wrecks your knees, and biking is proven not to get your legs in ski shape. If you want to start ski season like you left off last year, download yourself Rollerblade's award-winning Skate to Ski app, pick yourself up a pair of skates, and get to work. You can thank me in early December when you're surprised your ski legs are that strong. To find out more about all things Rollerblade, head on over to rollerblade.com. My final sponsor is Best Day Brewing. And I'll tell you, I've been loving having Best Day as a sponsor, as it's really helped me change my ways. See, I'm a binge drinker. Well, I don't drink that often. When I do, I put a bunch back. And my issue is that, like with everything, I drink way too fast. And within a couple of hours, I need to go home because the alcohol has gotten the best of me. But not anymore. Now I'm managing my fun time by making sure that every other beer I drink a Best Day. And by doing that, I've been having my best days and nights ever. I can stay out longer, I'm coherent, happy, and I don't feel like crap in the morning. And they taste so good. I'll put a Best Day Hazy IPA up against any alcoholic IPA in a blind taste test, and you won't be able to tell which is which. On top of that, Best Days are only like 60 calories, which, like drinking less alcohol, is something that I think about these days. While I'm not asking you to quit drinking by any means, please support me and your health by heading over to bestdaybrewing.com and order a six-pack or two. Those are my sponsors. Now let's jump back into the podcast. When you are working with these people to get them back to be inspired and to get back out there, the mental part is something that's pretty interesting to me. And you hear a lot about the power of having a positive mentality. And really, I kind of question this at times. I mean, I've been thinking about it lately, and if two people work their asses off in the exact same way with the exact same tenacity to achieve the exact same goal, and one has a this sucks attitude, and the other has a I'm going to kick this thing's ass attitude, do you think the positive person sees more results, or do they both get the same out of their effort?
I don't think that there's anything that's going to give you the magic pill that's going to give you the upper hand, like in the Matrix, if you grab the red or the blue. But what I do know, and I do know this from time and time again, as much as we want to bullshit about the idea of manifesting and stuff like that, we have this manifesting board here at High Fives. And every time we get a new manifest goal achieved, we write a new one. And there's 5 goals up on that board. And one of the big goals that has been on there is to get a major gift to establish our endowment. So we had this big goal, this really large number gift on our board. And it was up there for 3 years. We talked about it every quarter. We looked at it. And there's been other goals alongside it. And there's been other goals of a partnership with a boat company and a partnership with an auto company and all these different things. And I'll tell you what, we've thought about those things, and, those goals are starting to come off that board as realities. We've gotten the major gift. We're excited to announce a really big partnership with a boat company coming up that's going to expand our surf program. And we're looking at an auto partnership as we talk. Those goals have been written up there, and it's stuff that we've looked at. I think that from the idea of focusing on those goals and focusing our energy, it keeps us driven in the idea of accomplishing it. Do I think that because we wrote those up there that we got there? No, but I think that it made us remind us as to why we wanted those goals. It made us to check in on them. And so when that concept of if the person that's like, I don't care how this outcome shows up, well, then what are they fighting for? Or if the person's like, I want to see my son graduate, or I want to walk my daughter down the aisle when she becomes married. That was Eric Zerenner's goal when he broke his back and wanted to relearn how to walk. I'm not saying because he made that goal is the reason he had his 100% recovery. There was a lot of medical things in his things that were on the flip side for him that gave a positive outcome. But I'll tell you what, if his goal was, I'm going to be a soured individual and I don't care what I do, I bet he wouldn't be where he's at right now. And so the whole point of it is that you can believe in manifesting, you can believe in mindset, but I'll tell you what, I've been told no more than everybody in this industry. I've been told no more than anybody. And I could have taken every no and never tried to turn them into yeses. And I know for a fact that what we've created at High Fives is a really positive thing, but it didn't come because people are knocking on their door saying like, hey, I want to partner with you, or hey, let's do this. It's come from 100 no's that I've turned into 5 or 10 yeses at times. And then from there, that 100 no's dwindle down to 20 no's that turned into 50 yeses. And the number keeps flipping. But it came from getting a lot of fucking no's, but always with a mindset that one day they'd become yeses. And I know for a fact that my story and others that I've been around and surround myself with have gone from that a no is just the first negotiation to a yes. And so if you want to surround yourself with people that constantly are on the sour, well, you're probably going to have sour results. But if you want to be around yourself with others that have this mindset of we can change the world, well, then you're going to change the world with these people. But it just might not be in the time frame that, everybody, and not everything's this path that's golden. There's potholes all along the way.
Well, that was really, really well said, and I thank you for that one. While this podcast has been pretty dark, I'm going to ask you one more dark question, and then we're going to get to more fun stuff. If you had to pick one story where you took someone who was at rock bottom and with the help of High Fives was able to accept his or her new reality and thrive, who would that person be? Just the most impactful one to you.
There's so many. And I think there's some that I don't even know. I think that's the true honesty of it. And at times, years later, I'll get a text that's like, yo, you saved my life in this moment. But the one I think that is just eerie, kind of, and it's even more eerie because I'm staring at a really tall picture of him. And I don't know if it's so much dark, but I know it could have went dark, is my best buddy, Trevor Kennison. He and I share this really weird moment. So in 2014, he had his accident. It was on November 14th. It was at 7:05 p.m. Eastern aka 5:05 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. And the reason I know this so well is the moment Trevor broke his back is the moment my mom died.
Oh, no.
And about 3 years ago into this 4-year project of Full Circle, we kind of unearthed that. And when Trevor got hurt, Trevor was a plumber. He was battling through pain medicine and all these things. And when I met him, he had all these goals. This is no bullshit. It's in the movie. It's not some story. And he had all these goals, and not one person would take him serious, truthfully, except himself. And his goals were of all the things he's accomplished. He wanted to backflip a road gap. He wanted to backflip a sit ski, first in a backflip and a double. He wanted to compete in all these things. And the kid's done all of it. And it kind of goes back and builds off of the question you just asked me. Trevor could have had a mindset that, like, oh, I'll never be a plumber again. I'm never going to do this, and never accomplish anything. But he set these incredible goals. And when I met him, he could barely ski. He could barely really do a lot of stuff other than crack a huge joke and a big smile and warm up the room the second he entered. And I think, like, the story of Trevor is the story of what I envision we can do as many times as we can with individuals, is find that person, give them hope, give them the tools they need, and provide them with the assistance that they want to get to achieve those goals. And Trevor is the spitting image of it. And I think from where Trevor was from the day I met him to where Trevor is now, and in the time frame, if you really look at it, it's just less than 10 years. He's gone from a plumber in Vail to potentially one of the most popular skiers or snowboarders in the world.
Trevor, he was able to create a life beyond his wildest dreams after he was injured. And you've been able to do that too. I mean, you were en route to becoming a pro skier at one point, but that didn't happen because of the injury. And because of the injury, I feel like you've had hundreds of opportunities that you would have never gotten if you were a pro skier, because you weren't going to be Seth Morrison. You might have had a BC level pro ski career. But when you think about all the different things that you've been able to do, because I'm going to run through some quick hitters here. First and foremost, what's the best ski trip you've ever been on?
Best ski trip I've ever been on was this amazing donor who unfortunately passed away saw that I probably would never get the opportunity to heli ski. And he took myself and Steve Wallace, our first athlete and a longtime employee of the foundation and a longtime friend, on a private heli ski trip into interior BC with CMH with my best friend Jesse Murphy, Uncle Scott Roberts. Miss you every day, Uncle Scott. But we had private guides, private bird. It was really funny. Like, most people get up at like 6 a.m. and they ski all day. Steve and I would get up at 9:30. We had about 3 hours worth of energy in our legs each day.
Okay.
We'd get up around like 8. The guides would be like watching their clock. They're like, where are you guys? We're like, don't worry, we'll be there. And then like we would go do these little like short 500-meter runs. And they're like, don't you want to go longer? We're like, no, this is perfect. They're like, guys, these are 15-second bird drops. We're like, yeah, it's perfect. Don't worry. Like, just having like the best time with these. And by the end of our week trip, like the guides finally got like, we were just there to try to get a couple face shots and a couple really great powder turns for some folks that got that taken away from us. And Uncle Scott, man, you're just an incredible human. And like, that is hands down the best ski trip ever. Second, Closo, KMK2. Couldn't see a licking. It was the most fogged in, I think, that mountain has ever been. But Camp K2, I think I ate 111 jerk links or whatever those were back there from Jack Links. So I've been on a lot of great trips, but nothing will ever top that CMH trip that Uncle Scott took myself and Steve on.
I remember the jerk links oozing out of your mouth, Roy. It was amazing. What A-list pro skiers and snowboarders do you consider good friends? Too many to count?
No. I mean, yeah, we've got a lot of great friends. We've helped a lot of great people. But like true, really great friends that have done a lot of great stuff for the organization on top of just like being rad skiers and stuff. Like Julia Mancuso, one of the greatest ski racers of all times, is a really great friend of the organization. And we've gotten to do stuff. We were just with Danny Davis. He just played in our golf tournament in Colorado. Along there was Burke Irving and Tornator Wallace and Chris Davenport. I'm kind of naming like the top tier. So yeah, I mean, we have a lot of great friends and a lot of great supporters. Unfortunately, all those individuals have also had friends that have sustained life-changing injuries and when they've seen the impact that we put forth. But I would say like the cool one that still was like Davenport the other day, just being like, yo, Roy, what's up? how do we win this tournament? How do we donate more? I'm like, yeah, Chris, like just do this. It's still wild. And Danny Davis, there's not a bigger icon than Danny Davis. And Danny Davis loves what we do. It's really rad. Who we have waving the flag for the foundation.
That is pretty rad. And I don't know if Chris Davenport has had an interview on SportsCenter, but has Roy Tuscany?
Yes, I have. I've actually had 2 interviews on SportsCenter. I've been lucky enough to have a really great relationship with Kenny Mayne and got to be a part of 2 really great SportsCenter spots that Kenny put together for the foundation. And yeah, you're right, Mike. Like, I'm sorry, the dude that got hurt pre-2006 wasn't going to be on SportsCenter.
And how many TED Talks has Davenport given compared to you?
I don't know the count of TED Talks Davenport's done, but I've done 2.
Okay, just checking. And then you seem to be really into NASCAR. And what's the most once-in-a-lifetime NASCAR experience that you've had?
Holy crud. I mean, the list keeps getting bigger and bigger.
I just want the best, though.
I know, like, there's a lot. There's one that's coming up that's going to be ginormous. Toyota Racing, to be honest, has made some of the most incredible opportunities because their commitment to mobility. Like, they've modified golf carts so you can get around the track. They just recently modified a pit box so anybody can get up there. But I think, like, if we're going to be honest, I built in a really good relationship with a recent NASCAR driver, and we've got some cool stuff coming out. I don't know. This year alone, I've been at every win of Martin Truex Jr.'s. And again, Toyota Racing's brought me to all those. So Martin Truex Jr. wins, sitting on top of pit boxes. I mean, this year I got to meet Pete Davidson and Bert Kirscher and Tom Segura at the Daytona 500. I got to hang out with Travis Pastrana there. I've gotten to sit in suites. I've gotten to go around the track at 155 miles an hour in a car. High Fives is going to have a truck at the Kansas race through some stuff. It's just endless. Like, if you don't like NASCAR, you just don't like marketing.
Well, speaking of High Fives having a car, you get a free truck, I feel like. I mean, I don't know if it's a totally free truck, but you have like a $90,000 decked out truck that's always the best of the best, and you get a new one every year, I feel like. Is that just a perk of being Roy Tuscany?
No, I pay for that. I do have a really good partnership with a local Toyota dealership that helps me get a really nice truck at an affordable rate. And my mom told me, one piece of advice, my mom always drove rad cars, like way above. Like, my mom was a teacher for 38 years, but she always drove rad cars. Cars that were maybe a little too hip or whatever, or a little too flashy. But my mom told me every single day you're going to get in your car. Why are you going to drive something that you don't enjoy, that you don't love, that you don't value, that you don't feel so proud of when you're driving, that doesn't make you so happy? And so for me, like, I have always gone above and beyond all of my automobiles to just fulfill my mom. Like, my mom passed away way too young. She was like that one person in my life that kept me so accountable. And that's why I say, like, I'm still growing, all these years later. I don't have a mom anymore to keep me accountable. And I'm an adult. Yes, I know, blah, blah, blah. But like, only child mom. And it's like, if that was my mom's piece of advice, if that's going to keep me accountable, every time I get my truck, it's going to make me smile. It's going to make me happy. It's going to make me think of my mom. Well, then I'm going to drive a nice truck.
No, that's awesome. That's a great reason for it. And my podcast, I talk about money and all kinds of shit. We talked about money in terms of people being injured earlier. But you're the head of your foundation. This is a nonprofit. And I will say you have a sick house. It's in Reno, but it's still a sick house. Can you make 6 figures running a nonprofit organization?
Well, Roger Goodell is the head of the NFL. He makes close to, I think, 7 figures. So you definitely can. Do I make Roger Goodell money? No, I definitely do not. I can take care of myself running this foundation. And I wish that High Fives was the size of the NFL and other so-called nonprofits like the NFL that can pay their top executives some really large change in selections of money.
So that means that the NFL doesn't have to pay taxes?
You nailed it.
God, that's such bullshit. But whatever. That's not what we're here to
Isn't that wild? Like, that's like the wildest thing. Like, that's the problem sometimes. It's like, how's the NFL a nonprofit?
And churches too, man. They're the worst. Churches in the NFL. I'm boycotting them all. And I've boycotted churches my whole life. Not really boycotted, but being Jewish, we don't go to them. But I will say, you live your life on the road, Roy. And how much budget is allocated to Roy Tuscany travel each year? Because that's what I really want to know.
Well, the thing that's always allocated is the fact that all of these events have sponsors or some individual or a family foundation that's helping put them on. and we build it into the budget of all those things. And so the idea of an allocation, there's not really. It's that the fact that these events are built out to include myself, staff, and athletes. And that's one of the things that we raise every year at the Silver Tie Gala. We set a dollar amount to provide the funds for athletes to be able to attend camps, to events, to attend contests at no cost. And that's one of the big things that we're always pushing as we're fundraising is how do we get the opportunity to get athletes to more events, to more events, to more contests. And so that's the big number that we're always mostly focused on.
Okay. Well, you're not going to answer my money questions, any of them, I don't think, but I'm going to keep asking them a little bit. So you have this dream professional life, but then you're like a sponsored athlete influencer these days, which is incredible. What brands pay you or what brands support you? What brands pay you?
I'm really lucky to be an influencer for the brand Eddie Bauer. Myself and Trevor have been a part of their leadership. And from that, it's given us the opportunity to do a lot of amazing things from Eddie Bauer. Outside of that, the majority of the brands that I work with are mostly just built up on relationships for high fives. I get no compensation. If anything, I probably over deliver. And it's just to build the relationship for high fives. That's really it. I think like there's obviously a big thing, like the old 90s commercial from the Hair Club for Men. The guy's not only the president, he's the first client. And I think, that's a good way to look at the impact, the passion, and why I feel like High Fives is very successful is that myself being the first client, I can really speak from where this place has come and where it's going to go. And from that, that's built up a lot of really great brand relationships for myself that, have suited as really great partners for High Fives and elevate the impact that we can do from a community and standpoint for the disabled community that we serve.
The final question I have for you is a weird one. It's about weather. You live in a place where you're constantly shoveling snow. It's like when it's a deep winter, your life sucks and it can get really cold. And your partner has also had a life-altering injury. She's been on the podcast as well. And between the two of you, it's not like you have bodies that are built to like withstand the cold and the moisture in the air. Like I know with a bad knee that I feel that shit in the air sometimes. How long can you guys survive living in a mountain town? Or is there going to be like a warm weather spot for you at some point?
I see us transitioning to warm weather for a portion of the time. I think Tahoe is the most amazing place for us as it offers almost all the sports that we cater. But yeah, the weather, the snow shoveling. I bought a snowblower this year. I have never had a snowblower in my whole life, but this past winter I finally had enough. And I'll tell you what was I doing for the last X number of years with that one? Snowblowing is amazing. It's so fun. It's so quick and it's awesome.
The one difference between shoveling and snowblowing is like no one wants to use their handy. They want to blow, right?
God, you've been waiting for that one.
Well, you set me up for it, man. I had to do it.
No, you're 100% right. So, who doesn't want to blow yeah, exactly. You nailed that one. But I think like that's the takeaway. I've lived in mountain towns my whole life. I think I want at some point vacation to snow. And I've never done that. I've always lived in snow. And I'd love to know what vacationing to snow might feel like.
All right. Well, Roy, that is the body of our podcast. It is time for Inappropriate Questions. And I was able to get the most high-profile High Fives athlete to ask them. Trevor Kennison is gearing up for his documentary Full Circle to get its theater release. And right now, he's currently in Australia. But I was able to get some time with him so we could ask his mentor, you, Roy Tuscany, 3 inappropriate questions. Are you ready for question number 1 from Trevor?
Let's go from down under.
Good morning, Roy, and good morning, Mike Powell from Australia at 7:13 in the morning. My inappropriate question to Roy is, what happened when we came back from NASCAR Sonoma, and how many cans of liquid death did you use?
I knew he was going to ask a poop question.
All right, so one, I could never go to a Habit Burger ever again. So Trevor and I, coming back from Sonoma, we're pulling a trailer, and I definitely had eaten a bit unhealthy at Sonoma. A lot of hamburgers, hot dogs, corn dogs, chili dogs, basically any type of fair food you could think of, I stuffed into my belly. And on our way home, as we're driving up I-80 back to Reno, my stomach started to rumble. And I thought I'd be okay. And so we got to the spot, parked the trailer. I took one step out of the truck, and I thought I could make it to the bathroom at Habit Burger. Unfortunately, I couldn't, and I unloaded about 3 days worth of fair food, NASCAR food, into my current underwear / shorts that I was wearing. I realized there was nothing I could do, but I did know that I had a case of liquid death in the back and a small thing of soap in the side door. And so without even hesitating or thinking of what's going on, I stripped down completely naked in the middle of this parking lot, started putting soap all over my body, pouring liquid death cans. And the Trevor question there is how many cans. It was important. I cracked 11 cans and left one unopened. And Trevor always wanted to know why. And so as I finished off the 11th can, felt like I was completely clean, had a large pile of clothes that was no longer good to me, and a massive pile of just cleaning water, soapy poop. I had that last can to drink and just enjoy the moment, because when I turned around, there was about 20 to 25 cars in line for Habit Burger, and I'm pretty sure I changed their order as they saw this all go down.
That is amazing. I thought when he asked the question, because I didn't get the answer, but I figured when Liquid Death came out that you had drank too much of something and you were going to fill cans up with pee. And I really thought that was the question, which is why I brought up poop, because I was like, he wasn't going to poop in a Liquid Death can, but way better question than I thought it was. Let's go into question number 2.
My second inappropriate question for Roy Tuscany is, my first High Fives golf tournament was in Copper, and Roy ended up flipping a car with our friend Steve. What was his choice of alcoholic drink at the time when he was not sober?
Yeah, this was a while ago. We haven't hosted one at Copper since, God, we just approached 10 years. I want to say this was in my closing days. And in my closing days of drinking, it was a really easy. It was many shots of tequila and Corona. And on that day, I still owe my buddy Brandon Martinez from our Return to Dirt program for getting the car off me. And that is not one of my better moments, but I'll tell you what, if we can all learn from things with a little bit of humility and grace, we all can get things and learn from. But yeah, don't try turning a car at full speed when it's wet at 90 degrees when you've been drinking all day.
All right, that's a good lesson to live by. And your final inappropriate question.
My third and final inappropriate question for Roy Tuscany is, tell me and explain what a poop boner is.
Like,
oh, man, I love you, Roy. Mike Powell, thank you so much for having me. And yeah, cheers, guys.
This is a question that really fits perfectly into the Powell movement, because the Powell movement's about poop, and then we might as well talk about poop boner.
All right, so I don't know if this is scientific, but here is what I believe a poop boner is.
Okay.
So with my spinal cord injury, as we talked about, I don't really have the ability to have the best bowel and bladder. And there are days, sometimes 5 days, where I don't shit at times. And so there's a massive amount of poop inside of my body. And then finally, for some amazing moment, it will release. Well, we all know from, I think it's like one of the Stifler movies, that there's a gland outside of your butt that if it gets like under sensation, it'll give you the best freaking orgasm of your life. So what I think is, in these moments when I've had poop inside of me for like 5+ days and I finally go, it goes past this gland and there's so much poop that it like stimulates it and it creates this like everlasting boner. And Trevor's referring to the one that happened at the golf tournament in Vermont in a porta potty. And like for 4 hours, I thought I had a Viagra commercial and there was nothing I could do about it. And lo and behold, that's what I believe is a non-scientific description of a poop boner.
That is amazing. And that's Inappropriate Questions. And that's our podcast, Roy. When we set this date up a couple of months ago, I had no idea my personal life would be in the shitter again, and interviewing a good friend would make things a lot easier and better for me. So I thank you for making time for the conversation, because I truly love you as a person and what you've done with your life in the High Fives Foundation, because it really does have legs. Even if they don't always work 100%, you make the big difference, and you're making a huge difference in everyone's lives. And I thank you for your time, and thank you for all the things that you do.
Thanks, brother. Love you so much, Mike. Always here for you. Enjoyed our time together once again, bud.
So that was time with Roy Tuscany, and he said a lot of things that I needed to hear. I'm having trouble being positive about things in my life right now, based on all the bad news I've been hearing. But hearing what Roy had to say made me reevaluate what I was thinking about positivity. It does help, and I need to be more positive about everything. He was also able to shed some light on why I don't hear from some people who I thought were best friends. I'm taking what Roy said to heart about that matter, and I'm going to try not to hold grudges against people. So thank you, Roy Tuscany, for your deep thoughts and kind words. They really did help me out, and I needed to hear them. It was also great to share things that you haven't talked about before. One of these days, Roy and I are going to start a podcast, and it's going to be awesome. Until then, thank you, Roy. Thank you, everyone, for listening. And please review me wherever you listen and support my amazing sponsors. I only work with the best, and they are Outdoor Research, Stanley, Rollerblade, Best Day Brewing, Elon Skis, and Peter Glenn Ski and Sports. Have a great week, everyone.